Thank you, gentlemen, for coming up. I'm going to just take a brief moment to introduce this panel. After this panel, we will have a 12-minute break, so you will have time to refresh biologically. So in all of this work that you've just heard, you've heard a lot about the science of the microbiology, how soil life can change the parameters of how we're thinking about agriculture. But implementation of these things that we know to be emerging understandings and some very well known, how do we implement what we know on the ground? What kind of partnerships are we reliant upon to help get the word out, to help pay for implementation? So I just want to point to something that already exists in our country. In 1862, the Morrill Act granted states that were eligible about 30,000 acres of land to establish institutes of higher learning that would focus on agriculture and engineering. And in 1862, this was before the synthetic chemistry, or what we know as the Green Revolution, these land-grant universities were focused on supporting the understanding and the higher learning, the kind of work that David is doing, and continues to do, would be conducted at these institutes. And that was always the intention of the land-grant university system, donated through the act of this 30,000-acre initial land-grant donation. Following that, in 1914, cooperative extensions were developed that were designed to partner with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the land-grant universities. And they were authorized by the Federal Morrill Acts of 1862 and 1890. So then you had institutes of higher learning, developing new understandings of what was going on in an agricultural system. And then you had the bridge builders. You were supposed to have the ag extension offices as places where you could demonstrate the research writ large on landscapes. Then if you fast forward to 1937, the first soil conservation district was organized. It was actually in the Brown Creek watershed of North Carolina on August 4th, 1937. And today there are over 3,000 conservation districts, now known as resource conservation districts, across our country. And I believe there's 98 districts in California. And I know someone in the room who can answer that question. Kristen Murphy, who works for the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, is here today. We sometimes forget about these efforts that were made before the Green Revolution. We forget about the efforts of pre-industrial agriculture to do research and to disseminate that research and to demonstrate that research at large. These are institutions that still exist. They're funded by our taxpayer dollars, and they are designed to support an agrarian culture. Whether that was actually even in a rural community or even in an urban center. There were urban ags ways of engaging as well. This is an agrarian culture that depended little on external inputs and did not depend on large businesses at the time to provide the genetic inputs. So again, this was about protecting genetic reservoirs, and there are places where germplasm, for instance, for mulberry, there's a germplasm nursery run by the USDA. I think it's in Winters. There's still places where these seed banks and genetic spaces are protected, and all of which was to make sure that we had food, fiber, fuel, flora, security, and the USDA was designed around food, flora, fiber, and fuel initially. So to frame this panel, technical service providers are critical to getting out the content that David described. And we can't scale this work without our partners. It's not possible. So we could commandeer our public institutions to serve out these regenerative agriculture aims, goals, and things that we know to be true. And the gentlemen up here are in partnerships that I find very interesting. Their geographies are here, so you can see who, where we are represented today on the panel, all the way from Buttonwillow in Kern County, up north in Winters, the Willow and Yolo County area. And today's panel is just about exploring and hearing what these partnerships look like, and to think, for all of us in the audience, what are these partnerships reliant upon? What are the key takeaways? And what can we do to support their work at the end of the day? The moderator for this panel is Nick Wenner, our lead processing engineer for Fibershed. I'm so grateful that you're taking this on today. Thank you, Nick. And I will pass it to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. And I've been keeping everyone on a tight leash with timing, but now I have to hand that to Rebecca. But we have plenty of time now, so we can just relax into my panel. Today we'll hear from everyone on the stage. We have Nathaniel Siemens, farmer at Fat Uncle Farms. Just raise your hand. Rex Dufer, Western Regional Office Director at National Center for Appropriate Technology. Adam, how do I say your last name? Boisvert. Adam Boisvert, Program Manager at Urban Agriculture Academy at Urban Tilth, North Richmond. Miguel Garcia from Sustainable Agriculture, Program Manager, Napa County Resource Conservation District. And Kelsey Brewer, Agroecology PhD student at Gowden Lab, UC Davis. So we'll start today with introductions from each of them, a few minutes about their work. We'll go into individual questions for each of them, and then maybe a couple questions from the audience at the end. Thank you. So we'll start with Nathaniel.
Thank you. Let's see. I gotta figure out the slide thing first. Does anyone wanna? Sure. Thank you. So my name's Nathaniel. I'm originally from the southern San Joaquin Valley. Okay. And I grew up in this place right here. And even though that's my son, that could have been me. I grew up playing in ditches and kind of messing around with water while or as like my dad likes to say, messing up his water as he tried to irrigate. As a kid, you don't think of what's going on around you other than just the messes that you get to make and the bugs you get to find, the frogs you get to play with. But where I grew up at is the belly of the beast. It's the heart of the agro-industrial complex. It scores the lowest on all the socioeconomic indicators that you can imagine: education, drug and alcohol use, childhood obesity. It's the Appalachia of the West, and I like I said, I didn't grow up knowing that. It was just home for me. But my parents felt that acutely. They even though my father was fourth generation farmer in that area, he was a second generation cotton farmer in that area. And more so my mother. And also, this wasn't something I learned until adulthood. That she, I just knew her as a mom and as a farmer. She was up, at 4 o'clock in the morning on the tractor, and she was, watering and doing all the same things as my dad was doing. But it wasn't until after I went to college and they lost the farm. The farm went bankrupt. That I found out that she was the first one struck by the system that had been built on a patriarchal scaffolding. She was the one who was ostracized in her community and felt that sting of the consequences of this kind of inevitability of a corporate system built on something other than community and on reliance between people. But obviously, the farm going under impacted my father pretty immediately and dramatically as well. Go to the next slide. So I got back into farming with a different reality. Obviously, if I had the land base and the cash base that my parents had, I wouldn't have needed to rely on other people. But that wasn't my reality. My reality was that I came in as a landless farmer, as a capital-free farmer. So, so I got to rely on these guys and on the friendships and partnerships that I came into. And this was the reality that I had, is that I don't have access to the good land. I have access to the land that's highly salinized, and is the outlying land, which is actually where I think where a lot of opportunities are.
Pretty good. Which is what we want, this section. Pretty ideal. I think this is as close to ideal as we can get in this little section here.
So that was our first go at regeneratively farming cotton, but the reason I'm here today, why I'm farming, why I'm talking regenerative is because of her. And it's exciting for me to see an audience that's very different than the Wheat Commission audiences that I see, where I'm the young, kind of not quite fully white person in the audience. This is great. And like I said, she's the if I can change the system, move the system a little bit towards one where she can thrive, then I've succeeded.
Great, thank you, Nathan. And we'll hear next from Rex, and he'll be speaking about some of the partnerships he's been involved in, including working with Nathan.
Yeah, great. Thank you. My name is Rex Dufour. Oops.
The right arrow.
All right. And you can see this is obviously not me. This is my cohort here. And it's been great to visit his farm down in Buttonwillow. But I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that in a little bit, but this is some of the land down there. It's very highly salinized. And my nonprofit, National Center for Appropriate Technology, we run something called the ATRA Project, which is a National Sustainable Ag Information Service. And we try and help farmers like Nate and a lot of other small farmers and medium-sized farmers with information to approach farming as an ecological endeavor. And so for the past, I don't know, 20, 30 years, I've been mostly in California proselytizing about ecological approaches to soil management and talking to farmers about it's not enough just to add compost and suggest to farmers to grow cover crops. If you explain why that actually works, it works a lot better because farmers are very innovative. Once they have a model in their head, then they can take that and run with it. However, that model can combine with their labor availability, their equipment availability, things like that. And so I was excited to meet Nate and his very highly saline soils because it represented an opportunity. And they are really saline. If you know anything about soils, having an electrical conductivity and EC rating of about over 11, it's pretty high. Not too many plants withstand that. Anyway, talking to farmers about the soil ecology and how to manage the soil as an ecology has been kind of my foundational effort, I guess. And this has been a very interesting collaboration between Fibershed, Nate, and NRCS. I'm a real advocate of NRCS, as well as the local RCDs. And I just want to mention a couple other partnerships that elevate that I'm involved with. There's Environmental Defense Fund and this Pacific Gold, as well as Bypass Farms. That's another collaboration. Working in areas that are going to be impacted by climate change. We're going to be impacted by climate change and as salinization. I have 0 minutes left, so I'll finish up very quickly. Anyway, working in pecan orchards. Pecans are not a huge crop in California, but interestingly, pecans do not have root hairs, and so they're immune to Phytophthora, which is a big disease of trees and other plants. And anyway, two things, extreme flooding and extreme salinization as a result of climate change are things that we're working with our partners. And that's just some contact information. So,
great. Thank you,
time's
Rex.
up.
We'll hear next from Adam about his work in North Richmond.
Testing. All right. Good morning, y'all. How y'all? How's everybody doing? You doing good? All right. So my name's Adam. I'm out here from across the San Rafael Bridge, Richmond, California. Beautiful Richmond, California. Anybody from Richmond out here? Yeah. What's up? Heck yeah, I didn't think I was going to see anybody out here from Richmond. But it's good. It's good to see y'all. I'm a program manager at Urban Tilth. We've got about 7 different project sites in and around Richmond that work on cultivating people, really, but it's food that we're growing in these project areas. And it's all grown by folks that are basically living in the community. Our staff is almost 100% Richmond and San Pablo residents, and they're mostly folks that have come through our programs that are now managing and getting paid a living wage to grow food in the city. So it's urban ag. Yeah. All right, so there's more. The slides. Cool. So most of this, all the sites, so 7 different project sites across Richmond. All of them are in partnership with public organizations, City of Richmond, Contra Costa County, and my project, which is in partnership with West Contra Costa Unified School District. It's the Urban Agriculture Academy at Richmond High School. It's a 2-semester science elective at Richmond High School that really what we're trying to teach our kids is how do we deal with consumer culture at the end of it all? How do we deal with this concept and this fear that we have as Westerners, right? This fear of inconvenience, right? How do we deal with the, it's an inconvenience to filter the food we put into our bodies. McDonald's is right down the street, right? It's open 24 hours. It's an inconvenience to filter the clothing we put on our bodies because Walmart's, up the street too, and you can get next day delivery or same day delivery. So how do we start rethinking about how we address our consumption in the city and in the urban setting? And really what we try and lead them and steer them towards is nature, is being outside and learning from the best teacher of relationships and connectivity. Because what we find is that once we start understanding people in our community, we start understanding that the resources are all there. We have seamstresses, we have tailors, we have blacksmiths, we've got welders, beekeepers, growers, beer brewers, hey. And once you start seeing those pathways to getting resources, things that were once an inconvenience are actually seeing a friend, spending time with somebody you care about, which uplifts the process, uplifts the resource, and honors that act of creating something. That's the over 2 semesters we get there. I mean, it's a slow immersion for the kids, but we do other things on campus too. We take them out to the woods. So this is our summer internship program we have every summer. It's about 40 youth that we employ, and get them a nice little immersion into the woods and try and take home the lessons from the trees. What are they teaching us? How do they build such strong roots and grow so big? It's because they're tied to where they're at. They're in relationship with everything around, and we're talking about the mycorrhizae, the underground network, the original underground network of mushrooms and everything. And these kids take some peace to a city where, at night they're usually hearing police cars and ambulances. In the woods, they're hearing, owls and bats and talking over campfires. So this is a beautiful picture. So twice every semester, the kids take the food that they're growing in the class, and they serve it up during lunch for free to everybody. All the produce, all the dressings, everything, all the flowers are from the garden on campus at Richmond High School. And the kids, we were supposed to do it yesterday, actually, but we had this weird rain event, global weirding, for an hour and a half that was right in the middle of our class period, and I didn't want to get everybody's Nike shoes and Jordans wet, so I would have gotten, yeah, it would have been a mutiny if I had done that. So anyway, we'll do it next week. Yeah, everything we're doing is in partnership with city officials and public land. We don't own anything that we're on. The most recent partnership we've taken on is one with Contra Costa County. It's 3 acres of land in North Richmond, the North Richmond Farm, and we have a 30-year lease to develop the land. Yeah, it's dope. Hey. This is also really briefly, these are my 2 staff members, Laura and Deanna. Both of them went to Richmond High School and are now taking on an herbal apprenticeship after-school program where they're teaching youth how to create medicine using plants from the garden. So it's cool. Yeah. I'll show any more slides. Oh, these are students picking up free food after school. Students get to harvest for free. Teachers pay a little bit. It's donation-based, but yeah, students get all the food for free.
Great. Well, thank you, Adam. We'll ask more about that in a second. So next we'll hear from Miguel from the Napa County Resource Conservation District.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. Very happy to be here. I work for the Napa County Resource Conservation District, and this should be a video. So as I talk, I'm just going to show you a little bit of what we do. Part of my job as the Sustainable Ag Program Manager is to disseminate information and provide technical assistance for the growers so that they can implement more sustainable practices and reach all of their productivity goals. Another very important aspect of my job is to manage our vineyard demonstration site. This vineyard right here was purchased by the RCD in the early 90s, and all of these was grazed by cattle, and it was not taking good care. So when we brought it in, we are right next to a riparian habitat. We're next to the Wichita Creek, and they decided to bring it back to life. So now the creek, after 20, 30 years, has been fully restored. And one of the many things that we want to demonstrate here is that it is possible to farm adjacent to natural habitats without necessarily compromising your productivity and without damaging the natural areas. So we are right next to a riparian habitat. We have 20 acres, of which 12 are planted with grapes. We have a very nice setback so that we give enough room for the riparian habitat to do its thing, since we work so hard to reestablish it. We are so very prone to flooding, so we decided to just allocate a few acres for a natural floodplain so that the natural habitat can reestablish itself. We have a lot of birds, deer, I've seen a bobcat, and by doing this, we're demonstrating that it is possible to coexist with nature and not compromise, but actually enhance your own productivity. So we're very proud to show these to the growers. We are, in a sense, a little bit unique to other RCDs, that we actually have this property that we own and that we can actually do whatever we want. So as a project manager, I have full clean sleeve to do whatever I think it's necessary for us to demonstrate our projects. So we have a lot of different trials happening at the vineyard. We are trying till and non-till so that we can demonstrate to the growers the benefits and the setbacks of doing these kind of sustainable practices. At the same time, we are experimenting with compost at different rates in combination with biochar as well. We are demonstrating the use of woody mulch under the vine as a way to mitigate weeds and conserve moisture without the use of herbicides. And more recently, we have partnered up with Dr. Amelie Gaudin and Kelsey Brewer from UC Davis to integrate sheep into our soil management. Last year, we had 2 different events. About 300 sheep came into our vineyard twice, and they just munched on all of our tall grass, giving us free fertilizer and making everything just so pretty. By doing that, we were able to not use the tractor as much to come and mow, and we were able to create one more powerful partnership, one of many. And at the same time, this is something that not everybody does in Napa County. Not everybody incorporates sheep. So this is something new that we're trying, and we're putting workshops together. And if anybody's interested to attend, we're going to have another one sometime in March. If you look at our website, we advertise all of our events there. But we're trying to promote the use of sheep more and all of the sustainable practices that are possible in our region.
Thank you, Miguel. And we'll hear next from Kelsey about his work with those sheep and with the Napa RCD.
All right, testing. All right, good morning. So my name is Kelsey. I work at UC Davis in Amelie Goudon's agroecology lab, and I'm a PhD student researcher in the soils and biogeochemistry grad group. So amongst my projects that I work on, a lot of my work focuses on what we call integrated crop livestock systems, or the integration of both cropping systems and livestock systems that are historically in industrialized agriculture separated from each other and specialized and high input, synthetic input and whatnot. And we try and integrate these systems together to try and form synergies between the two and see how they can be cohesive together. One of the main types of integrated crop livestock systems I study is integrated sheep vineyard systems, which is relevant for this region, Napa, Sonoma. That's kind of how we got into it. So we kind of are really looking at how it affects soil carbon sequestration and the general soil health and biology, and also the ecology of the landscape as well. Kind of really just asking a simple question: can this improve climate change mitigation, the resilience of these systems to climate change, and improve the health and productivity of these systems? So we kind of take a look at these systems, and part of how we look at it is realizing that this is an agricultural ecology and that there's lots of interacting dynamics. So the introduction of sheep into a vineyard system might impact something like the net primary productivity or the photosynthetic activity of the forage itself, impacting the return of residues. You know, maybe it'll impact the root to shoot ratio, where grazing might stimulate root growth and deposit carbon deeper into the soil. It might increase, you know, vegetative quality. It'll change the quality, the carbon inputs, the nutrients of the forage itself, and the ratios of carbon to nutrients and whatnot. Could also impact the biodiversity. I mean, that's pretty apparent, in that the biodiversity will also have subsequent impacts working down the agroecological system. Looking at root functional diversity, the architecture of roots, and spatially the excretion of exudates and recruitment of microbes into the rhizosphere. And again, the quality of all these things, and impacting the microbial composition and the function. These are all things that we're measuring as well in this project. And also, of course, the conversion of residues into dung and urine, and the hoof action and trampling effect, and kind of like biotillage and incorporation of these things into the soil surface as well. And so before doing this project, we're currently working with Napa RCD on a project. We did a survey project of 6 different vineyards, 3 that had been integrated, and next door neighbors with no integration but very similar management characteristics, to try and get a little bit of an idea of this system. And one of the main things that we looked at was soil organic carbon. Kind of, it's been talked about, but like soil organic carbon is like a central variable in soil health. It's the basis of the soil food web and energy exchange. So as we see soil organic carbon go up, we tend to see a lot of other soil health metrics kind of go up as a relationship to that. And we saw that amongst these 3 sites, as a total percentage of soil organic carbon, in the top 15 centimeters on average, in those 3 sites that had been integrated, they had 1% more carbon after 10 or so years of grazing sheep than their next door neighbors. And you can see that all the way to a 45 centimeter depth zone, there was an increase in soil organic carbon simply by displacing mowing with grazing. And we can see that there is about 880,000 acres of vineyards in California, so the capacity for this to actually be monumental and change is pretty substantial. But you can say we see, I kind of have to wrap it up, but carbon goes up, but there's all these mechanisms on how carbon goes up, and this is what we're really exploring in this project. And so we're working with Napa RCD at the Huachica Creek demonstration vineyard, kind of testing all these things in a long-term monitoring trial right now. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. And we have about 15 minutes, so we'll probably go through, and we're going to hear more about specifically the partnerships that these folks have engaged in to do the work that they're doing. And we'll go through and hear a few minutes specific questions for each group, and then if there's time at the end, we'll see if we can do some questions from the audience. So I'd like to start with Nathan. And Nathan, can you tell us a bit more about the Button Willow site, and also what drew you to working with Rex and the National Center for Appropriate Technology, and where were you in the planning process of your farm and that relationship starting?
Yeah, the partnership between Rex and I was serendipitous, I think, or lucky, or just haphazard. As I kind of alluded in when I did my introduction, I came back into farming, knowing that I would have to form partnerships in order to have the possibility of success, and I'm not 100% sure that possibility will be realized yet. 10 years into it, I'm cautiously optimistic, but sorry. So the partnership with Rex was just happened by chance. I had started the application for organic certification, and there's a grant associated with that pays a good portion of your fees. And so I put in an application for that grant, which I thought was going to be very straightforward. But it turns out that I was applying for the wrong grant, which happened to lead me to Rex, to be given his phone number. So call this guy. He's a technical service provider. He'll help you out with this application, with this process. And so we're still in the process of figuring out that part, because we realized really quickly that there was a lot more interesting and exciting things that we could be partnering on, which interesting and exciting is obviously a kind of cup half full. As I mentioned, there's a lot of socioeconomic problems in the southern San Joaquin Valley, in the Central Valley of California in general. Besides those socioeconomic problems, we also have the worst air quality in the nation. We also have some of the most saline soil conditions in the United States. So when I called up Rex and he actually came out and visited, and we got to meet each other, he saw that there was a huge opportunity to jump in with some scientific applications on our land, and leverage some of the programs that he was familiar with. So it was a very natural fit given our context.
Great, thank you. And we'll hear from Rex now. And Rex, can you share some of your work at Fat Uncle Farms and what you discovered there in the process, and how NCAT is set up for you to do that sort of work?
Right. So it was serendipitous, and fortunately serendipitous. And the reason I was so excited was, California is mostly irrigated agricultural land, and in human history, irrigated agricultural land in arid environments does not do very well long term. Matter of fact, all of those civilizations are extinct now, and we're the only ongoing civilization that is doing that right now. But with climate change, we're going to be facing longer drought periods, which cause farmers to rely more on groundwater, which happens to be generally more saline. And if you're throwing on 2 to 4 acre-feet of water every year in a drought condition, what happens is the plants grow okay, the water all evaporates and leaves behind salts. And so as the drought continues, the salt builds up in the ground, and your ground is kind of exceptional, but I was excited, exceptional in a good and a bad way. I was excited that, all right, well, I'm interested in looking at the role of organic matter as to help ameliorate salt problems, because I think the Central Valley is going to be heading into some real problems with saline salt and sodic soils, which are a whole nother issue. And so I was really excited. And so we're talking about, how can we apply compost to help the germinating seed, which is the most tender unit of the whole plant growth process. Germinating seeds do not like saline soils. And the only, Nathan did not mention that he planted a 14 species, I think, 13 species cover crop. The only thing that came up were mustards, and as you may or may not know, mustards do not have mycorrhizal interactions. They're the only plant family that has that. Anyway, it's just like, it represents a very interesting opportunity to research issues that will be hitting us pretty shortly, I think. So, and NCAT allows me to do this because it's a nonprofit and we are focused on helping farmers do the right thing. Leave it at that.
Thank you. So we'll hear now from Adam, and I'm wondering if you can share more about who you partner with at Urban Tilth, and maybe more about the lease that you mentioned.
Yeah, so we got the 3 acres of land in North Richmond thanks to a long-standing partnership we have with one of the supervisors in Contra Costa County named John Joya. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the RISE Center. It's a youth center in Richmond. He also was one of the founding kind of contributors to that project, so very progressive man, super supportive, and just over the course of time, just being consistent with the work we do, being kind of like having integrity in the work we do, and just being and showing up really has garnered lots of support from public officials, and that's allowed us trust, which has allowed us access to land, which is kind of the common denominator in the Bay Area. Like, how do we get land, especially in the urban setting in the city? So hard to come by. A square foot there's lots of folks. I was fortunate enough to get a home in Richmond 2 years ago before it got really crazy, but now none of my friends can get in. But access to land really is, and being in relationship with those folks that are able to either give or lease out those spaces. So that's for the North Richmond Farm particularly. But I feel like the majority of the work we're doing is relationships, is partnerships, but it's with folks that, in the community, it's people, really. That's the most common thing in Richmond that's overlooked. A lot of people overlook a lot of the folks that are living in hard times in the city. And I feel like what we do is we actually train, hire, employ, and bring up the people in Richmond, because oftentimes you get people coming into the community with solutions that are not of the community. And what folks need to realize is that people that live in those environments are experts on what they face every day, and need to be listened to. So I would say that's definitely something that we've learned is completely necessary for a just transition into a community kind of owned and operated food system, or social structure, what have you, that the people need to come first. So the City of Richmond, one of the slides I had before was our apprenticeship program. So the City of Richmond has a Youth Works program that they basically hire on about, I think it's over 100 youth every summer to take part in job training programs, and we get a lot of our youth from that program as well. So with the City of Richmond, that's definitely something we're appreciative of and are partnering with. But small businesses definitely too, and it's mostly just kind of being open to reach out across whatever your neighborhood or a business and talking to people, which I feel like we're really gone away from. I feel like our relationships are very segmented and compartmentalized, and it's difficult. And you look at Mother Nature, teacher of relationships. How are we treating her? It's no wonder that our relationships aren't that great. Screen time, instant feedback culture. It's a lot of our youth are inundated with these things, and it's teaching about relationships and partnerships has a lot to do with bringing people out into the wild and what access people have to land, to the earth.
Thank you. We'll hear next from Miguel. And Miguel, can you share more for us how resource conservation districts work, and, for example, how you work with universities, and what excites you about this institution as a resource for us?
Definitely. The resource conservation districts are special districts, so you can think of us as a school district or a water district. So we have a board of directors that oversees our operations. In our case, it's composed by growers, people working in the industry in the area, people involved in politics in the area. So we tried, there's elections for it as well before they're appointed. There's a very strict process by which they do that, but we have a board that is composed of pretty much everybody that represents our community. Being a special district, we get some tax revenue, so we have some money that comes from you guys to do the things that we do. I will say that's enough just to pay the rent of the building where we are. So a lot of most of the money that comes for us to do the work that we do comes from grants, and that couldn't be possible without different partnerships. So for us, partnering up with universities, in this case we're working with Kelsey in UC Davis, brings not only much needed funding but also expertise that maybe our team does not possess, so that we can expand on the kind of work that we do. At the same time, doing that, knowing if the community knows that we're working with universities, that allows them to be a little bit more comfortable coming to work with us. So we partnered a lot with the local growers. We have several groups of growers working with us on different projects. So we have trial sites not only in our vineyard, but with other growers. And this has come because we have built a very strong relationship with them. And they can trust that what we're asking them to do is not going to put them at any risk, but actually bring some benefits. This is actually the third RCD that I work for. Before coming here, I was working with the Coachella Valley RCD and the Inland Empire RCDs down in Southern California. Every RCD is a little bit different depending on the focus of the work that they're doing, but one of the things that I can tell you that I enjoy the most about working with RCDs is the fact that we think in a holistic way. Just like I was explaining the goals of our trial demonstration vineyard, we tried as RCDs to look at the entire environment, and we tried to work with every single aspect of that, whether it's working with schools, working with the community, working with the local government, working with the growers to meet all these sustainable goals and be able to help the growers manage their land in a more sustainable way. And we do this by just looking at everything combined. When I'm working at a farm, with a grower, I'm also looking at the natural environment around them. And when my coworkers are working with the land around the farms, they're thinking also about the farm. So we try to combine everything together to be able to help the environment as a one unit, not separate from a farm or a natural environment, but look at how we can bring them together. So every RCD, like I said, is different depending on the project they're working on, but they have very qualified people in different aspects. I focus on the sustainable agriculture aspect, but I have workers that are foresters, biologists, hydrologists, and we work very close together to be able to meet these goals. We also work very closely with the NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is a branch of the USDA. Almost every RCD that I work with is co-hosted in the same building with the NRCS, and this allows to even bring that partnership even a step farther, because if we don't have the expertise, they will, and vice versa. So we can actually meet the goals of the entire community, not only the agriculture community, but everybody else within it with pretty ease, something that we wouldn't be able to do alone.
Great, thank you. So we'll hear last from Kelsey Brewer. And Kelsey, can you share more about how you came to work with the RCD and what that resource has provided for you in your research as a member of a land-grant university?
Yeah, so kind of focusing on these integrated crop livestock systems. Kind of like globally, it's estimated that like about 3/4 of agriculture globally is integrated crop livestock systems, right? And it's in kind of industrialized ag, in which we see this like disparity and separation and kind of specialization of agricultural systems. And so because land-grant universities tend to honestly focus on industrial ag, focus on ag centered in the Western world and whatnot, integrated crop livestock systems, integrated sheep vineyard systems, all these things have received very little research. Like in science, they're calling it like a novel management practice, but we know it's like an indigenous and ancestral management practice. And so the research kind of started, honestly, because Rebecca and Fibershed approached the lab that I work in, Amelie Boudon's agroecology lab, and was talking about how producers in the landscape that work with Fibershed are interested in this, right? And there's not very much research to support the outcomes of it. So that's basically how I started working at UC Davis, was for this project. And thank you for Rebecca for that. I appreciate that. Yeah. So initially we were working with private producers, commercial producers. And that's important because you capture an element of a landscape that's relevant for producers. You can go and say, well, we did this on a producer's landscape, but there's also challenges to that, which is that a producer's ultimate goal is their bottom line, and often ecological management and other things, but they have to be profitable. And sometimes research really, really likes isolating things and being like, let's manage everything the same except for this one thing. And you do these blocks and you do these treatments, and it's very hard to do that on a commercial landscape, right? And so we ran into some challenges over and over and over, and we've got some good research from commercial sites, but then at a CalCAN conference, California Climate Action Network conference, we met some representatives, the predecessor actually, Miguel Charles, at Napa RCD, and he was telling us about this demonstration and experimentation vineyard that Miguel's been talking about, the Huachica Creek demonstration vineyard, and saying we can put something aside and we can do this. And so we wrote a grant together, and it was successful, and it helps to fund our research and push our research forward. It helps to maintain the RCD, which is an incredible public resource. If you don't know more about it, and Miguel's talked well about it, RCDs are the main transfer of knowledge from the institution to producers in the community. And in scientific research, we basically have a bottleneck where you have a ton of people producing research that is either irrelevant or doesn't reach producers, right? And so having these projects that are on demonstration vineyards where producers are going and they're seeing it, and we're doing long-term monitoring trials, and we can kind of disseminate results and talk about them in reality as people are literally at the site with the sheep in the landscape. It provides an opportunity for us to both experiment and demonstrate by doing these kinds of isolated treatment differences, because while they manage Huachica Creek profitably, or constantly attempting to manage it profitably, it also is a piece of land that's meant to demonstrate kind of experimental ideas, and not necessarily constantly driven by profit. So that's been really beneficial for us.
Great. Well, thank you all. So we've reached our time, so I think I'll need to stop there. So I think I'll just close with, as Adam was saying, the relationships are so important, and that the change in culture is as important as the discoveries and the practices. And so thank you all for the work you're doing individually and for the work that you're doing together.